Welcome to Mining the Media, providing nuggets of news and cutting-edge questions and answers, minus the political blather. Here are your hosts, G.K. Allen and Dave Jeffers.
Welcome to part 2 of Bill Federer's interview on Mining the Media.
And LBJ said to the Democrat governors, if we pass a watered-down version of this, then and do the entitlement programs, we will have those, and he used the N-word, voting Democrat for the next 200 years. And so this, and he also did the same thing with the immigration quotas. So he changed the immigration quotas in 1965 to bring in more immigrants from third world countries. Prior to LBJ, most immigrants came from Europe, Germany, Ireland, England, and they had a European Judeo-Christian Protestant work ethic. And it was considered a social stigma to take a handout. But immigrants from poor third world countries didn't have that stigma. So they'd come over, sign up for it. And I've talked to people. I just was this last weekend speaking in California, and a lady came up and said, yeah, her parents came over from, one of these third world countries, and they got welfare. And of course, she went to school, and now she's really successful. But she says, my parents are still on welfare, and they're afraid to get off it. They don't know how that. Once you get people dependent, then you can more or less count on their vote.
And so, right now we're having people, a lot of jobs around America aren't being filled right now because people got used to the government handouts via the COVID situation. Yeah. And I know here in Florida, a lot of the tourism industry and the restaurants are having problems getting people who have been weaned for the last year or so with some extra money from the government. These people don't necessarily want to get the jobs. There's literally thousands of jobs in Florida and elsewhere dying to be filled.
I put together a book, and the title of the book is Socialism, the Real History from Plato to the Present. And then the subtitle is How the Deep State Capitalizes on Crises to Consolidate Control. Wow. But it goes through, basically a drug dealer can take over a neighborhood two ways. He can come in with guns, or he can give away free drugs and get people hooked. Yeah. And then once they're hooked, they said, you want some more drugs? Sell yourself into prostitution. Steal from your neighbor and bring me some of that money. And the people, once you get used to receiving free stuff, the government says, okay, to continue to get this, you've got to get the vaccine. You've got to get the vaccine passport. You've got to, do this, that, and the other. And at some point, they might require you to get some chip or something. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
But
as it relates to the Declaration of Independence, in almost everything important in life, whether it's government, history, whatever, or things that are more frivolous like sport, there's always someone who is great but falls through the crack. As it relates to our founding fathers, Bill Federer, who would you nominate for someone who is vastly underrated as it relates to our founding fathers?
Well, that's a good question. There's lots of people.
What's your favorite?
Some of them are names that you're familiar with, but maybe for a different reason. George Washington. Why do I pick him? He twice had all the power and gave it up. So he was the commander of the army that defeated the most powerful king on the planet. He could have made himself president for life and marched into Washington, D.C., but he didn't. He resigned from the army. And then he was elected president. The Constitution did not specify how many terms a president could be in. He could have stayed in office till he dies, but he said 2 terms is enough. And every president honored that until FDR got himself elected 4 times. And then they passed the 22nd Amendment, limiting a president to two terms. But you contrast this to Simón Bolívar. He was the George Washington of Central and South America. And he got all of Central and South America to break away from the King of Spain. And they were going to have a country called Grand Colombia. And they were going to have states, and it was going to be just like ours. But Simón Bolívar insisted that their constitution have the president be president for life.
Yeah.
And it caused the negotiations to bog down. They fell apart. Some of the different countries says enough of this. They left, and then it never happened. but there could have been the equivalent of the United States of, of New Spain, of Central and South America, had it not been for Simon Bolivar insisting that he wanted to be president for life.
But when you talk about Washington, you're absolutely right, because he had a strong will, but he did not have a sick ego. He was a very well-balanced man.
Yeah, and he was always in tooth pain, which is sort of sad. I mean, he eventually lost all of his teeth. But when the revolution had just ended and the King of England was having his portrait painted by Benjamin West, and the king says, well, what's the rumor of what this Washington is going to do now that he has defeated the king's army? Benjamin West said, well, they say, Your Honor, that he's going to return to his farm. And the king said, if he does that, he truly will be the greatest man in the world. I mean, here you have kings killing to get power, kings killing in treason to keep power. And Washington had the power, and he gave it up to go back to his farm.
Yeah.
Right. And so this is one of the reasons that, and this was not just him. He set this example. He said, weapons were the last thing to pick up and the first thing to put down. And then there's the Whiskey Rebellion. And he is, quite honestly, the only president that acted as commander-in-chief by getting on his horse and leading the army to Western Pennsylvania, to Pittsburgh, to put down this Whiskey Rebellion. And when he got there, they could have rounded up, all the leaders of it and had them executed.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't. He rounded them up and forgave them and let them go. And that set a precedent that you don't go after your defeated enemies. You don't try to get them, have lawsuits against them and go through their taxes and try to prosecute them and get everybody that.
Well, are you suggesting something about Donald Trump and what the Democrats are doing to him, sir?
Yes, it is a mark of a third world country to kill and wipe out everybody associated with the previous leader.
Unbelievable.
It's amazing. I just brought up a copy of the Declaration of Independence, and talking about cancel culture and, prosecuting or at least trying to indict your political enemies. This is what we were, we said this last time you were on. If I could bring King George back to life and we could do a tour of America, he would be rightly enraged that we rebelled against him and that we're putting up with what we're putting up with now. Because I love, we always go to the second paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident, but I love the chapter or the paragraph before that. The unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So they knew what they were doing was something big deal, and they also knew that they needed to have the world opinion on their side. And I don't think that's what we do. I think we're the opposite. I think we try to get ourselves on the side of world opinion. What the founders were doing was we have a righteous cause, and here's going to be a list of things why, but we want you to understand why we are who we are and what we're doing.
Yeah, that was their clear understanding that it wasn't just a rebellion. It wasn't just, we don't like this guy. It was this concept that rights come from a creator. Mm-hmm. The government's job is to protect our God-given rights. The king has unkinged himself because he is no longer protecting our God-given rights. And therefore, before God and the world, we're just in rebelling against the king and breaking away from him. If there is no God that gives rights, then yes, we had no right to break away from a king. He's the king and we're underneath of his thumb. But we had to, there's a great quote from Eisenhower. He says, in some countries, the government claims to be the source of human rights. if the government gives rights, it can and inevitably will take away those rights.
Yeah.
He said our founding fathers had to refer to the creator in order to make the revolutionary experiment make sense. We had to go above the king's head. We got rights from a source high. One of the flags that was originally used by the Continental Navy was the called the Appeal to God flag. It was the pine tree flag because the first war against or battle against the king was in Maine, and the king claimed all the trees for the masts of his worldwide navy. And the farmers in Maine didn't like the king's person coming there and marking the best trees, and and so there was a battle that took place. But it gave birth to this idea of the pine tree flag. But on the top of it, it said appeal to God. And the thought is, what does it mean, appeal to God? Well, you already made reference to the Declaration being an indictment. But if you go to a court and the court does not give you justice, what do? You appeal it to the next higher court. If you don't get justice, what do? You appeal it to the Supreme Court. What if the Supreme Court doesn't give you justice? You go above their head, you appeal to God. And so that's what the founders understood, that we get rights from God, and these rights are being violated. We're appealing to God.
I sure hope that those who are listening to this, and some of you may be watching it on YouTube and Rumble, that you really appreciate what we've talked about, because in this day and age, and GK and I are big history buffs, and we're astounded by what you've been sharing with us, brother. But this does not get taught in schools anywhere, even in the best schools. This is not being taught. And I think what you're doing and what you've been doing for pretty much your life's work is so important, because it's not just a matter of, I think too often Christians, we want to focus mainly on the American Christian heritage, which is important. Because it is true, it's historical. But I think they're leaving out the most important part, and that's what you just talked about, is that everything we do, everything we are as Americans, is because our rights come from God. And that when we forget that, then we'll wear a mask for 15 months. We'll forcibly take a shot. Now, I took the shot mainly because it was more convenient for me at work. And I was in the Army. I don't glow in the dark for no reason. I don't even know how many shots I got over the time of my 22 years in the Army. So I took the shot because I do work for the military. But to not only want to force things onto people, but to defend that enforcement means you forget who you are as an American. And I think hopefully what people will walk away from this show is a new, fresh understanding of what it truly means to be an American.
Amen. Amen.
It's a funny thing. Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but of all the powers, say, for the last 300 years of history, we're the only one that really wasn't an imperial power. The British were an imperial power, Spanish were, but the United States, especially at the end of the 19th and fully the 20th century into this point in time, we've never really been a major, shall we say, imperial power. And we were someone when we defeated the fascists in Europe and Tojo in Japan. We gave the world the Marshall Plan. And I don't think any other power would have given us a Marshall Plan had we been the loser.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Marshall Plan says a lot about what you've been connecting the dots during this chat we've been having, is that there really is a morality, some degree of consistency throughout the American history book.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I mentioned the Marshall Plan in my book on socialism. So after World War II, the countries in Europe had their freedom, and they elected new leaders, and they were climbing out of the post-war problems. And the Soviet Union decided that it wanted to take over these countries. And so they called it critical theory, where they would go into the countries and identify all the groups, ethnically, economically, racially, religiously, and they would pit them against each other as victims and oppressors, haves and have-nots.
As we see in today's headlines.
Yeah,
here.
it's like, oh my goodness.
And they would escalate them into violence. And as soon as there was bloodshed, people would no longer think rationally, just emotionally. Then you could manipulate them through fear mongering and race baiting. And then they would co-opt the media with bribes and threats to blame the new leader for all of the problems. And when they panicked enough, they would do a coup or a rigged election and replace the leader with a Soviet puppet. And so the Soviets began to do this in countries across Europe, including France. Right. So they just came through a world war. The people were starving. And so they were going over there claiming that the new, Republican government wasn't working and they needed to do the socialist route. So Marshall goes over there and he sees this and he goes, if we don't hurry up and give them some money, they will go in the socialist direction. And like some of the Eastern European countries did. And so that was the Marshall Plan, to go away, hurry up and give them money so that they could get on their feet quicker and not become a satellite of the Soviet Union.
Mm.
Well, God bless America. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, and I think that's a great place to end this on, because we could go on forever, but I think we've given us enough. And I want to make sure that those listeners use Bill as a resource. He has stuff everywhere. You can go to AmericanMinute.com. As a minimum, sign up for his newsletter. But he has an unbelievable bibliography of books there, a library of books you can get. He's on Amazon. So for all of you who like to buy your stuff through Amazon, he's on Amazon. Just type in William Federer and the list is long. He's also on Rumble and YouTube. So I really want to speak to my homeschooling parents. Bill's resources are phenomenal for your kids. And I'm talking from smaller ages all the way up to high school and college. Because what we've learned today, like I said, GK and I, we've been around a while. I've been all over the world. I've been to those countries you spoke of, or Greg, that you spoke of, Albania. I've been to Bosnia. I've been to Kosovo. I've been to Tunisia. I've been a lot of different places where freedom is nothing like it is here. And I really think that if our parents, I taught my kids were patriots, and they are patriots. But that's because we taught it to them, but we showed it to them. We took them out. We took them to these great, many beautiful places that you can go and walk and see. And I just want to encourage our listeners to get a hold of Bill's resources, because they're not going to find them anywhere else. Not as voluminous as this is. And
are you suggesting, Dave, that CNN is not going to invite Bill on? That Jim Acosta?
Well, if they do, then he needs to do what was it Representative Mo? What's his last name?
Brooks.
Did you see the video where Jim Acosta tried to interview?
Oh, the bicycle?
Yes, he tries to interview him, and Mo Brooks is like, "I'm sorry, I don't go to CNN. I don't trust you guys." So I don't know that Bill would want to do that, but sometimes it's good to go into enemy territory. I don't know. But Bill, thank you for coming on. And of course, we're going to have you back. I think if not before, definitely September, when Constitution Day comes around, because a lot of schools will teach this. My oldest daughter is a 5th grade teacher. She loves teaching American history, and especially the Revolution. And I'll make sure she's aware of everything. I do send her stuff from your website. But folks, AmericanMinute.com, great place to start. William Federer on Amazon, on YouTube, on Rumble. I'm going to put you up there with some of the guys GK has interviewed before, other historians. David McCullough. You, my brother, are a national treasure, and we are thankful for you. And And you're just such a humble man, but you've done the Lord's work for so many years, and we just thank you so much for coming on our show.
And allow me to point out, as I look at the screen right now, Bill is dressed like an adult. I am not.
That's because he is, man. Come on. He knew this. He knew this last time he came on. You know what? I thought about putting on a tie because I have a nice tie, but I thought it'll be my luck that Bill decided to come on casual, and I'll be wearing a tie. But I should have known better. He is an adult. You're right.
I make Jimmy Buffett look formal.
Well,
Bill, it's wonderful speaking with you.
Bill,
Thank you for stimulating our brains.
Yeah. You have a great Independence weekend, brother. And again, may the Lord continue to bless your ministry, because that's what it is. It's a ministry.
Well, thank you, Dave, and thank you, GK, and all those that are watching. Pray that the Lord bless you as well.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Take care. God bless.
All right.
That was wonderful. We're still live. And I just wanted to wrap it up with your last thoughts, GK.
I mentioned it briefly toward the end, just a few moments ago. Back in the days when I did the network show, The Right Balance, I had the opportunity on more than one occasion to interview David McCullough, Pulitzer Prize-winning historian, and Thomas Fleming, another brilliant historian. I very much would recommend those two gentlemen and William Federer as being incredible. If you want to know history, read Bill Federer, Thomas Fleming, David McCullough. These people are absolutely remarkable. And Bill is one of those people. At times, I almost have to bite my tongue because some guests just impress me that much. And I don't want to come across like an unctuous little toady, if you know what I mean. But Bill really is incredibly knowledgeable. And he has the capacity, which some historians who are equally knowledgeable don't have. He knows how to communicate that knowledge.
Well, he does it because this is not his primary job.
Some of them, when they're speaking, frankly, are just too dry.
Right. Well, Bill, this is not Bill's primary occupation. I call it a ministry because I do know him. I've known Bill for probably 15 years now. I first met him in St. Louis in 2007. And this is a ministry for him. And when you look at the volume of work that he's put together, and it's not his primary profession, it's just incredible. It's a love of his. It's a ministry of his. Hey, let me whet your appetite for those of you still listening. Start at the AmericanMinute.com. Sign up for his newsletter. I promise you, every day, it takes you about 10 minutes max to read what he sends. And it's got beautiful pictures. The writing is eloquent. It's easy. It's in the same voice that Bill talks. And every day you're going to learn something new. I just learned something new reading his today on Cuba, where he talked about how Woodrow Wilson segregated the military. So start there. And then, but especially for your homeschoolers, my gosh, particularly from middle school on, the stuff that Bill has available at his website or on Amazon are the best resources. If you truly want to teach your children patriotism and U.S. history, avail yourself of this.
And do yourself a favor. This is something we need to spread the word on. Don't let CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times bother you. Pay no attention to them.
Exactly.
Wean yourself away, because they've just become nothing more than propaganda ministers. They're not even, you can't even call them the mainstream media anymore, because they're really Goebbels.
Yeah. In fact, that video that I sent to you this morning, GK, from Dan Bongino's show.
Yeah.
He described it perfectly. He said they're clowns. They're clowns. Why? He goes, in fact, Bozo the Clown is actually better because he never told a lie. So why would you listen to a clown like Acosta or even CNN, and Mo Brooks put it the best. He goes, you people lie and deceive all the time.
You know my music background, and after I saw that, when Acosta was repeating the same question, the former music critic in me, in my head, I was playing one of my favorite Pink Floyd songs, Bike. By Pink Floyd on their legendary first album. I've got the bike. You can ride it if you like. It's got a basket, a bell that rings, and things that make it look good. I'd give it to you if I could, but I borrowed it. That would have been the perfect song for all this.
It was classic because he just rode off. And Acosta was almost begging him, please come back.
My Bicycle by Queen. Come on now, you know?
Gosh. All right. Well, hey, folks, you look, holidays are to celebrate. You know, we do celebrate the 4th of July. John Adams wanted us to do it. We have fireworks because John Adams said we need to have fireworks. We need to have picnics. This is the one holiday that in America is we actually do as it was designed.
And it's a truly American holiday.
And it's truly American. And we haven't commercialized it too badly because it was, in a way, started as somewhat commercial. Hey, get together, have some fireworks, have some fun. But you know what? If nothing else, a lot of families, particularly Christian families, on Christmas Day, they like to read the Christmas story from Luke chapter 2. I highly recommend that. I also highly recommend that you set your kids down, not if they're 3 and 4, but if they're middle school and older, maybe even, when they're starting to learn history, tell them this was written because the king was a very bad man. And he thought he was that he was God and that he was above God. And so these brilliant men, these 56 men, pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their honor to a new experiment because they knew that our rights come from God. And this was their indictment. They took the king to the court of public opinion and made their appeal and read it to them as an indictment. And I think they'll see how bad it really had become in America, to the point that we needed to rebel because they took over. King George took over the mantle of God. And whenever you do that, we are to obey God's laws. However, we cannot, we're to obey our government and man's laws unless it makes us disobey God's laws. And I'll stop on that. Otherwise, I'll start teaching a whole nother Sunday school lesson here. But okay, remember, AmericanMinute.com. Go to Rumble, go to YouTube. While you're there signing up for Bill, sign up for us, Mining the Media. We're at Rumble, YouTube, we're on Stitcher, we're on iTunes. So for those of you who don't watch them, but you like listening to it, a lot of you are doing that. I hear from you all the time. Keep it up. Subscribe, rate, and let all your friends, relatives, associates, and neighbors know about it, know about us, pass the word. And these are the kinds of shows we want to do. And we will get Bill back at least for Constitution Day, because as GK always says, the First Amendment matters. And this is where our rights come from. They come from God. So happy Independence Day weekend. Be safe. And we'll catch you next time on miningthemedia.com. Check out GK leaving.